Art and Culture podcast, the home of bold dialogue, cultural brilliance, and perspectives that move the needle forward.
Hey everybody, this is Scott Terry, and we're back here again with another episode of the Black Art and Culture podcast. Today's guest is the one and only Rhonda Sewell, and Rhonda Sewell serves as the inaugural Director of Advocacy and External Affairs at the Toledo Museum of Art, where she leads governmental relations, advocacy, and strategic community partnerships. So, welcome, Rhonda.
Scott, thank you so much. And I know that is really a mouthful, that long title, but I appreciate you and I'm so excited to be on your podcast.
Absolutely. I'm really excited as well. And I think we should just jump right into it because you have a lot of experience and you have a lot of insight, to provide for everyone who's listening in on the podcast. So we'll jump right into it. So first question I have for you, Rhonda, is how has your personal background shaped your approach to leadership within major arts institutions?
Well, thank you for asking that because as a director of advocacy, which is really I'm a glorified lobbyist. Let's just call a spade a spade. So in my day-to-day job, I pretty much advocate for museum funding from local sources, but mainly from the state and also federal dollars. So just getting that out there. And I find it so interesting because I have, Scott, a social justice bent to my personality and what shapes me. That's my core. It's always been social justice. And I know where it comes from. It's definitely from my parents. My parents were 19 and 21 when they had me. They were young, married college students who attended the University of Kentucky. One of their classmates was Pat Riley, the great basketball coach,
Indeed.
and they transferred to Bowling Green State University in Bowling Green, Ohio. And so that's where I was born. And Bowling Green State University had at that time just two Black fraternities and sororities. And that was the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And just for the record, I'm a proud Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated woman, just celebrated 30 years. So, but I'm
Wow.
telling you all of this because my dad was the house president and the chapter president. They did have a house at that time. And that's where I was raised. I was a little mascot, I guess, baby mascot in a sea full of alpha men who were my play uncles. And at the time, um, the alphas and the deltas were really trying to get the administration to understand that at that time it wasn't Divine Nine yet. Because I don't look it, but I was born in the 60s. And so at the time they were trying to advocate to get more Black Greeks on campus. And there were some administrative meetings and protests and all those kinds of things. And one of the campus's regular visitors was the great late James Baldwin. There's even a room named after him at BGSU, Bowling Green State University. He came so frequently. There was an ethnic studies department at that time who would bring him here. And he really loved Toledo, the Toledo area and Bowling Green, Ohio. And when my mom tells me that she used to sit me on her lap and we'd go to lectures delivered by the great James Baldwin, it blows my mind, Scott, because I'm like, you mean, Mom, I shared airspace with James Baldwin? Are you kidding me?
Amazing.
And I was like, did I cry? Did I act up? She goes, no, you were mesmerized by everything he said. You were a good little baby and you just listened to him. Of course, Scott, I don't have any memory of this, but
Sure.
just her telling me this. And after graduation, dad went to Oklahoma City to get his master's in public health. And my whole childhood was shaped by young parents, activist parents. Mom was the first to go to college in her family. Dad came from a line of folks who were college educated. So they had very different
Hmm.
backgrounds. So that shapes me as well, you
Hmm.
know, from going back home to Kentucky to my mom's people, and they're in public housing, and then going to my dad's people, and they were sort of like college educated for
Hmm.
generations, and
Hmm.
military people and all the degrees and the things that we so I come from that kind of background. The two parents themselves were very much social justice people. My entire house was filled with books, and it was Black Like Me, The Bluest Eye, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee,
Hmm.
Invisible Man. That's my childhood. My mom read me, not Dr. Seuss at night. She read me Nikki Giovanni poems. That was my bedtime stories. So that is the leadership model that I had. That is the social justice bent model that I had. We throw around the acronyms now of DEI and DEAI and all of that, and that's great, but I come from a line of people who were about equity and inclusion and diversity long before it became fashionable or
Mm.
before it became an acronym. So to move that whole background and leadership model and philosophy into the arts and culture sector of working for a major museum, to me, is like a blessing. It's like I really get to practice what I've preached for all this time. So it just comes very naturally to me. And so I love that question so much because I can pinpoint the background and why I do what I do and the way that I move and the way that I walk the earth. It is definitely as a result of my parents.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Wow, that's beautiful. Shout out to your parents. That is for sure. You've got a very interesting, unique background, and it appears as though you've got well, not appears, it is the fact that you've got advocacy at the heart of who you are as as a person, as a human being. So this role that you have at the museum really ties in really nicely with your with your history.
It really
Uh,
does.
so moving next into the next question, I think this is a good segue into that. Um, so knowing that you've got this history that you're bringing to the table, how does that align? How does that match up with the policy and the legislation? How does that play a role in shaping equitable access to the arts in all of its forms?
That's such a good question because I was recruited by the current director for this particular role. I was in a similar advocacy role, but for I call them the greatest and most democratic of all institutions, public libraries. So I
Mm,
was with the public library system. It was a 20 branch, 21 maybe branch location in Lucas County, where I am in Ohio, outside of Toledo, like kind of Northwest Ohio.
sure.
And, so I was in a similar role of advocacy and, really going after funding and things of that nature in that role. And so now looking at legislative policies and funding structures supporting the arts and culture, I remember, Scott, when you and I met at the Black Fine Art Fair in Chicago, you and I talked about how rare it is to think of advocacy in the arts and culture ecosystem, you know? Um, you don't really hear about that, but we're here. There are people advocating on behalf of arts and culture because where would we be as a society without arts and culture and
Oh,
our
no.
institutions who protect? and amplify. Often describe myself as a culture amplifier because the policies that are existing now um, are somewhat fragile, and I would say based on recent cuts at least at the federal level in
Hmm.
funding structure, but um, a lot of them do amplify the arts and support the arts. And what I find, and this may be really hard for some of your listeners to believe, but I'm in Ohio, so I'm in a very red state. The county that I live in, however, is very blue. Um, but I find, Scott, that in my advocacy at the state level, um, both sides of the aisle understand the importance of arts and culture in society. And so when I advocate, my stories might be different when I go into this senator who's a red senator versus maybe going into across the aisle to a blue House of Representative. Um, but at the end of the day, they both understand that arts and culture needs funding. And the approach just has to be very, very different in my methodology. Really different. Like sometimes I can't even talk about art. And that's strange as well as an advocate. I have to go into the office and talk about how many jobs this ask is going to create, the tourism that it will bring to the area. I'm not really talking about art
Hmm.
preservation,
Hmm.
but I
Hmm.
can go across the aisle and maybe talk about art preservation, talk about the exhibitions that are coming up, but not on this side of the aisle. And Scott, I always use this mantra that as long as I'm not selling my soul to the devil when I walk into either office and I believe in the mission, then I'm okay. I'm okay using a different methodology. If that's the language you speak
Indeed.
and that's what is going to drive you to be voted in again next election cycle by your constituents to talk about how many jobs you created by supporting the museum, then I'm okay with that. I can sleep at night.
Indeed. Indeed. So,
So so the policies align. Policies align. It's just that we as advocates and lobbyists have to remind elected officials how important the arts are in society. And that's what my main job is to say how this aligns, why it's important, and why it's important for the voters who voted you into office, and why you should vote yes on this particular type of
indeed.
thing. So
Yeah.
it does align. It's just my methodology is very, very strategic. Very.
Rhonda, that's, I felt like you were reading my mind because that was actually my next question to you, but you just answered it already. And that question was, how do you approach advocacy differently when speaking to policymakers versus, um, cultural leaders or community members? So you did touch on that. So, with that being said, that is a strategy that you take when communicating.
You have to. You really have to, but you also have to make sure that elected officials understand the mission of your organization. And ours at the Toledo Museum of Art, I have to say this shameless plug, we were voted the best art museum in the country by USA Today for 2025.
Wow.
So really excited about that. And people in the arts world, and especially in the museum field, really know the reputation of the Toledo Museum of Art. It's odd that we're in the heartland, we're in the Midwest. They're like, Toledo has one of the top art museums? Really? Really, we do. We have almost one of everything, you know,
Yeah. Well, that's
where
amazing.
Elizabeth Catlett to, Monet, whoever, we have it here.
Yeah,
And
indeed.
so that's just really great. But the alignment is we're trying to integrate art into the lives of people. That's basically our mission. Integrating art into the lives of people. So when I'm walking in those, offices, the Senate halls and the House of Representatives and the General Assemblies, and going on the floor where they're, passing legislation and bills and all of that, I'm trying to remind them that the people who voted them into the office, my mission is to integrate art into their lives. And the way we can do so is you supporting this infrastructure project that we may have that will keep more people coming to the museum. So it's all trying to tell a narrative that makes sense to them and to learn to speak their particular language.
Indeed. So do you experience do people have in general like misconceptions about um arts advocacy? Are there some things that they're just not aware of or may think one thing was actually something else? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, they do. And I joke a lot when I say I'm a glorified lobbyist, but the one biggest thing is that to be a lobbyist on record, you have to be registered. And so I am not a lobbyist. I'm not a registered lobbyist. So that's I think the biggest misconception. To be a registered lobbyist, you have to spend so much time like at the state house. So our capital of Ohio is Columbus, Ohio, and that's where our state house is located. So it's 2.5 hours from where I live now. I would have to basically get an apartment and live there in order to meet the requirements to be a lobbyist. But I am an advocate. So the way the funding structure of my museum is set up is that we're a public private entity. So the private part is we have a huge endowment that allows us basically we spend it a lot on art acquisition, but then there's an operational side, and technically we're a nonprofit, and so we have to abide by those laws. So we can't be out there, we can advocate and we can give information, but we can't like endorse a candidate, so
Hmm.
to speak, or
Hmm.
we can't say yes on this piece of legislation if it's not related to us. And we don't go to the public at the ballot booth for any money. Our museum doesn't. Others do. We do not. Because we have this cushion of having an endowment. But we have to raise money just the old fashioned way, like any other nonprofit, going to donors, getting grants, things of that sort. So I think that misconception lies into, what is it that you actually do? And what I'm doing is I'm padding the coffers by going and trying to get some state capital budget dollars, going to try to get ARPA funds from local city
Hmm.
and county,
Hmm.
going to federal level and trying to get Institute of Museum and Library Services appropriated dollars. So that's what I'm doing. I'm padding the donor money that comes in. I'm padding um, the grant money that may come in, the revenue generation that we do naturally by all the services that we have here, from a store to we have a cafe. We even have a performance hall. So that's what I'm doing. So I think people misconstrue. They're like, "Oh yeah, I think Rhonda's a lobbyist for the museum." I do lobby, in the general sense of the term, but I'm not a registered lobbyist. We leave that to a firm, a lobbying law firm. So I work closely with my director, and also a lobbying firm in the state house who can be registered lobbyists. So it's a really interesting thing because I kind of have to act like a lobbyist because I have to file um usually every other month with the Ohio Ethics Commission. So let's say we invite a legislator in, and we pay for their dinner or we underwrite their dinner. I have to report that to the Ohio Ethics Commission just to make
Mm.
sure I'm not doing anything illegal or
Sure,
unethical. And they're not either. It's a checks
sure,
and balances.
sure.
So I think those are all the misconceptions. People are like, oh my God, I didn't know it was that layered or that intense of a job. But yes, it is. It is. But I'm not a lobbyist. I'm a glorified lobbyist.
Got it.
I always say, Scott, I play a lobbyist on TV.
Got it. Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So with all you said, my question that really came up as you were speaking was, in this role, is this role in the museum, is this a common role for other museums, or this is unique to the Museum of Art, for the Toledo Museum of Art? Can you speak to that a little bit?
It is pretty much unique to the Toledo Museum of Art. Um, I will say that other museums might have government affairs, but if they do, they're relatively newer positions. These aren't positions that have been around for a really, really long time. Um, and I think it's sort of twofold, Scott. In my mind, I think that um, a lot of arts and culture organizations saw that there were buckets of money at the local, state, and federal levels that were available to the arts. And when we talk about the arts, everyone always thinks it's about art acquisition, buying art or that. It's preserving the building. It's doing very non-sexy things like restoring plumbing
Mhm.
in a building that's been around since 1912. Like, it is
Right.
so layered, and so there are different pots of money that we can, go to at these different levels. Like, we have a state capital budget process. Our budget, like most states, happen about every 2 years. And there is like a pot of money for infrastructure dollars. And that's when all the projects come in, all the applications come in, and then we present to our local chamber, which then makes recommendations to the state legislature. They vote on how much money we're going to get, and then the governor signs off on it or vetoes it or
Right.
changes it. But it's a very complicated process, but I can say we have done well. And part of my messaging as a director of advocacy is really showing legislatures that we've been good stewards of their money, of governmental money. So when they award us money, we spend it within the time frame that we're supposed to spend it. Here's the big thing. We usually match it with
Mm,
private money. Oh my goodness. I can't tell you how much legislators love to hear that it's going to be a public private project.
got it.
So it's not that, especially if you have a certain party that is really concerned about big government. When you
Interesting.
come in as an entity and say, yes, we need $1.5 million for a new HVAC system, but we're going to match it with private funding, and we've already raised half of that funding. They're
Yeah.
more apt to give you the money
Yeah.
because they know
Right.
you're good for it.
Right.
You,
So
you know,
it shows you guys, you also have skin in the game as well.
it's skin in the game. We've
Yeah.
been good stewards of the money. We're always shovel ready, and the reputation is there.
Sure.
And so that's the part that sometimes is like that tightrope walk that you have to do when advocating for dollars.
So so that's a great segue into my next question. How should, in your opinion, how should museums measure your success, and whether it's from the museum aspect as a whole, or in your role with the museum? What does that look like? What does success look like?
It's so interesting because we didn't talk about this, but part of my background, I've been with the museum nearly 5 years. And part of my background, I was brought in post George Floyd
Mm,
tragedy as the director of belonging. And so that was more of a DEAI. We always add access in the museum field. We add the
right.
A to the acronym. So we are very concerned about, making sure that everyone has access, not just socioeconomically, but also persons with disabilities, seen
Mm-hmm.
and unseen disabilities. So we always add the A in my field. So doing that, belonging is more sort of, yes, it's internal policy, but it's also a feeling. It's like, how do you feel when you cross our threshold? Are you seeing yourself up on the wall? Are you seeing your culture, your religion, your background represented? Is your museum whitewashed? Is it all European history? Like, belonging is layered. It's so layered. Can I move around in my powered wheelchair in your museum? What can my son who's neurodivergent get a sensory bag to,
Mm-hmm.
like, or a quiet down room if he's, has a panic attack or
Mm-hmm.
whatever may happen? Like, it is so layered. It's traditionally making people feel like they belong who have traditionally been othered. So
Indeed.
that crosses sexual orientation, gender, age. I'm at the AARP age now. And so, we those 50 and up,
Mm-hmm.
have traditionally been othered or not considered. Even young people, there's assumptions made about young people. So it crosses so many, many different paths. So, but I just wanted to bring that part up, that background up with DEAI, and then me moving into really what is my wheelhouse, which is advocacy. Like, that's really my strong point,
Got it.
my wheel.
Got it.
That's what I do. So I was promoted and had a title change. However, I'm still in charge of our belonging committee here. If you log on to toledomuseum.org, you'll see our 28-page belonging plan, which has to be voted on by our board of directors. And it is updated yearly because we didn't want it to be a virtual plan on the shelf and performative.
That's just,
So
yeah.
we actually institute a lot of the things that are happening within it. And we have maintained our strategic plans mantra, which is we are going to be an institution that is committed to quality and nurturing a sense of belonging. We didn't scrub our when all the federal anti-DEI sentiment came down the pike, we didn't change anything. We didn't scrub our website, we didn't change the words, we didn't all of a sudden, get rid of things and run away from it. We were very bold in our belief system of a vision. We even have 4 values, Scott, and one of them is diversity. We didn't change that. It's community, innovation, trust, and diversity. All of these things are very uncommon for an institution such as a museum that has the reputation of being very elite. Museums are elitist institutions, right? That's their reputation. But this one in particular, Toledo Museum of Art, under the leadership of our millennial director, Dr. Adam Levine, he has great vision and a very diverse board behind him saying that these are our values. We want to be a different type of museum. And so I don't think with that background that we talked about earlier, I would even fit in if that were not the case. If we weren't, I always tell my director this, if we weren't walking the talk, I'm out.
Mm,
Out. And I see that we are. I see that we are from not only the money that we are putting behind things that make a difference to me in that DEAI space. But we're not backing down.
Wow, that's pretty heavy. That's pretty heavy about it. And
It's
that's
very
leadership.
unusual.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it is very unusual. I belong to a group of chief diversity officers or former chief diversity officers from around the country, from the Met to the Phillips to, myself to Mississippi to the DIA, Detroit Institute of Arts. I mean, we're from all over the country. We get together, Scott, once a month via Zoom and once a year in person. And any of my colleagues could get on here and say, nope, no, Toledo's different. Toledo's different. And
Yep.
they're always like, "You are so lucky, Rhonda, to work at a place where
That's
not
good.
only does director have your back, but the board has your back." And it's not about one person, but it's about making sure that a philosophy is really articulated not only internally but also to our visitors. So,
Indeed.
yeah, I don't think I could even work here if it didn't align with who I was.
So that's powerful. That's amazing. And I could speak to just a little tiny bit. I don't have that experience you have in the museum space, but the little bit I do have, it does seem as though I think historically there's been more of a performative aura, if you will, performative mindset. So, you touched on it, very extensively. But if you kind of solidify it, solidify that with this question, so in your opinion, how do museums move past, their performative work, the performative DEI work towards, more meaningful, actions and connections, and transformation. How can museums do that?
It's such a powerful question. It's a relevant question for where we are. Some of the performative nature of museums came out of just not knowing what the heck they were doing. Like, this was all new. Post George Floyd, everything was was new. It's like, "Oh, shoot." It was like a wake-up call. Like, "Oh, we've been excluding people? Our privilege didn't allow us to see that before.
Really? Wow.
Now we did." So they brought in people like me and people like my colleagues who have had a long history of, like I said, doing the real work out we were either activists or people who were always, leading the charge when it came to inclusion measures, equity, diversity initiatives, things of that sort. And then the institutions who were performative in nature, they just put out a statement and said, "I think this is enough. I think this is what we're supposed to do." And the others who really were about the work hmm, develop internal policies, internal vision, internal philosophies, a plan of action like we did, a actual plan, not a statement to put on your website so you'll look good in the
Mhm,
eye of
mhm.
folks, watching you. No, a plan that would be instituted and expectation put on there that every department would adhere to, and that we would measure the data, because we always say internally we are not data driven. We are not. We want the qualitative and the quantitative, but we are not driven by data. We are informed by data. We are data informed, not driven, because at the end of the day, I want to know how that sister and her family feels when they cross our threshold. How were they treated? Were they profiled? What was the culture? Did you feel welcome? Can we turn this into a repeat visitation?
Wow.
So we did things that I think other museums can model after. In fact, we're so bold with our stuff, Scott. We say we want to be the model museum in the country.
Indeed. Indeed.
And how do we do that? Here's some examples. Just pick up the
Indeed.
New York Times.
Right.
We've been in it we were just on the front page last week. We were just in it the week before because we were part of a conglomerate that spent $20 million buying Black art from Talladega University in Alabama, a HBCU. Yes, they were in financial trouble, but most institutions who buy that art and get these white institutions out of trouble, or these Black institutions out of trouble, they keep the art and say sayonara. Instead, we came up with a plan that every 5 years, the art would return to Talladega where it belongs and be under exhibition before it rotates back to us in
Mm.
perpetuity. Those are the kind of visionary things that move you from being performative to being understanding that culture matters, that this stuff matters. You know, what else did we do? We get a wealthy donor to say, you know, your museum, we're one of the few museums, I think there's only like 30 some percent in the country that are free to the public. So
Mm.
you don't, when you come, Scott, to visit in Toledo, you don't pay to get in. It's
Wow.
been like that since its founding. We were founded in 1901, and the structure that you see here, very neoclassical building, beautiful,
Sure.
was put in 1912. From that time, we have never charged. Now, let me get it on the record. There are some amazing exhibitions that we will have where we will charge people.
Mhm.
It may be $8 or something like
Mhm.
that. And
Mhm.
then for those who can't afford it, we have scholarships
Mhm.
so that they can get in. We don't ever want to block anyone. Well, to take it a step further, one of our donors, who's a former board member, was like, yeah, it's free, but it's an access issue. It's blocking people because when they come from another side of town, they got to pay $10 to get in your parking lot. That's
Man.
a barrier. That's an access issue. I got a family of 4. We all pile into my I don't. I don't, but I'm
Right.
saying
Right.
hypothetically, if I have
Right.
a family of 4
Right.
and I'm coming, I have to pay $10? That's like a lot. $10 is a lot. And then I go in and then maybe we want to eat something at your cafe, like I'm spending money, right?
Right.
This
Right.
donor, Scott, said, I got you. So as of January of 2025, we announced that parking now is free. We might be the only museum in the country where you do not pay for parking and you do not pay to get into our museum. That's how you walk the talk. You walk the talk by adding a Native American curator, a Asian curator, and an African curator to your curatorial staff.
Right.
That's how you you measure whether it's performative or not.
Yeah, indeed.
You have a belonging committee, you have ERGs, employee resource groups. I oversee all of that. We took it out of HR and put it under my purview.
Mm. Wow.
But we have, in this day and age that everybody's scared, we have LGBTQIA plus, um, ERG, Employee Resource Group. We have one called Women and Allies. We have one that I oversee personally. I oversee all of them, but I oversee as an executive champion, Black African American and Advocates Group. And then our final one is Parents and Caregivers.
Mm.
And we did it in a way where the staff chose what type of ERGs they want to have. That's another whole hour we could get into
Right.
about
Right.
trying to
Right.
be non-hierarchical and make sure that everybody, It's like almost an agile leadership model. Everybody weighs in to the decisions that are made from the museum. That's rare.
I think
That's
that's the work that the work that you're leading and a part of is really a testament to I think the direction that most everyone wants to take in terms
yeah,
of
yeah,
acknowledging that you know everyone everyone has something to offer. It doesn't matter where you come from or what your circumstances may be. You want those insights, you want those perspectives, and this what we've seen nationwide. It sounds as though the Toledo Museum of Art and yourself, the role that you have, has really dug into that and elevated that work in spite of. So I want to
yeah.
commend you for
Oh,
that
thank
courage
you.
to do that.
Thank you, Scott. I mean, I tell everyone, we can be big and bold and have all these wins, but we also are still building the plane in the air. Like, we're not there. We're not where we want to be, and we're not perfect. We still struggle with culture on the inside. We still struggle with, uh trying to incorporate new models of philanthropy. Like, philanthropy at most museums are still white elite rich dollars. That's just a fact.
That is what it
How
is.
do we how do we how do we look at new models? How do we look at maybe first and second generation folks contributing? Do we
Indeed.
do we need to incorporate a new model, a new language? Do we
So so with what you just said,
Mhm,
that's another great segue into my next questions,
uh-huh.
and we do need to wrap it up shortly. But I want to squeeze these questions in. So what future do you envision for museums in general, or you can speak specifically to the Toledo Museum of Art, um, from now, if equity becomes an authentic priority for other museums? Like what does the future look like regarding um equity?
Well, it's so layered. It's a fantastic question. It looks like more women and more directors of color at that level. It looks like more diverse boards. And when I say diverse, I mean of all diversity, even like we have an unapologetically CEO heavy board. But it also looks like bringing in community folks to sit on your board as well to get different perspectives. It looks like diverse staff. It looks like opportunities to introduce young people, even at an early literacy level, to museums, but also to the museum field as a career option. Um, you don't have that right now. It's like be an artist or a collector.
Like
There's
what are the other?
nothing
Yeah.
beyond that. There's nothing beyond that. It looks like, as I mentioned before, that we're doing having a very, very diverse curatorial staff. And I'll tell you my one pet peeve is that you have your niche African American, let's say, museums. Of course, their focus is African American art, but we don't see it at mainstream ABC museums. We
Hmm.
don't have African American curators of overseeing African American art. Now, what do we do as a culture, Scott? Well, we innovate and we do our own. There's the Black Boy Art Show. There's the, Black Fine Arts Fair. We do our own, we elevate our own, we bring in our own collectors, we do our own. But I want to see this at mainstream general museums, like the ABC museums. They have the modern collection, the Egyptian, collection. They have the
Yeah.
contemporary. I want to see, or the impressionists or whatever. I want to see curators like that because African American art tells such a story of our country and it should be elevated in a way that it's on display all the time.
I
I don't see
agree.
that enough, but if you have what you said, that equitable and diverse and inclusive museum, that's what's gonna happen. I wanna see that. And then I touched on, and I'll end here with, philanthropy. I want museums to not only focus on the Smiths giving $1.5 million dollars out of their estate. I want us to, look at the church usher board and maybe giving $1,000 to our outreach mission, which comes in the hood and has free art classes for kids because they want to help. And I want that $1,000 to be just as valuable by the mothers of the usher board at the, Full Gospel
Mhm.
Baptist Church as I do the Smiths $1.5 million gift. I don't see
Indeed.
that right now.
Indeed.
I
Indeed.
don't see it. And so that would be the equitable
Sure.
museum that I would see in the future. And I want, what was the Spike Lee movie talking about? How come there are no brothers on the wall?
Oh
I
yeah, that's
I
do
want to
the right
see.
thing, right.
I want various cultures to come in. I want them to be proud to see themselves on the wall.
I love it. I love it.
That's
I
what
love
I
it.
want. That's the museum in the future of my dreams.
I love it. Well, Rhonda Sewell, I want to say thank you for all of the insight, all the knowledge that you've shared, all of expressing your experience, your personal life as well as your professional life as well. I think I'm hopeful that this sparks more conversation for folks who are watching the podcast, and also it sparks some engagement with other museums who have just watched this and lean into your experience to help them in their efforts in their museums. Like you said, Black art is it's not a monolith. I've always expressed that and shared that. We've got we representation in every form of art, but also we're lacking in, like you mentioned as well, the leadership in these spaces and institutions and galleries. I mean, there's much more work to be done. So I want to thank you for expressing that. Thank you for spending this time with me today on the podcast. And with that said, do you have any parting words for viewers of the podcast today?
Well, Scott, I just kind of want to take just a moment to also commend gallerists like you. um, in your own form, you are an advocate as well. You're an advocate for, the clients that you represent, the art, kind of amplifying that to the world. If we didn't have galleries, I don't know where we would be. I'm like, galleries and libraries. I live in galleries and libraries, and exposing us to art and also giving artists a chance because, as your mini display at the Black Fine Art Fair held in Chicago recently, I mean, you have such a wide range of artists that you represent. And it gives I think, people like you who are gallerists give people who are emerging maybe in the art field, but also who are OGs in the art field, a chance for collectors to say, that resonates with me. That piece resonates with me. An art is subjective, right? We always say that. But I just want to, I guess, just take time to commend you and for doing this podcast to get the knowledge out there, to really show that the world of art is so diverse and so vast. There's so much. And the more knowledge we have with podcasts like these and visiting galleries like yours and Racine, it is just something that, especially I always want our young people to be aware of so that they can look and maybe they can step foot in maybe opening a gallery like Mr. Terry did, or becoming an advocate like Miss Sewell, was, because they listened to this podcast, or said, hey, I love government affairs, but I didn't know that museums had a role like that, So I guess, spend this last time really commending you. And I love the quote that we must be militant about the validity of our story. Gloria Naylor, the great African-American novelist, said that. She was the writer of The Women of Brewster Place and Linden
Right.
Hills. And she always said, you must be militant about the validity of your story and your truth. And I feel like every time I step foot in a legislator's office, I am being militant about the validity of my story, and also representing my institution and its true mission to get funding. And we've been very successful at doing that. Because we articulate it in a manner that is understandable by legislators, and they know we are good stewards of that money. So I just want to end on that note, and thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, the pleasure was all mine. Rhonda Sewell, I'm going to thank you again. And for the viewers out there who are watching the podcast, if you are in the Toledo area, or even if you're not in the Toledo area, make sure you go check out and visit the museum. And if you're there, if Rhonda's there, you go say hi to Rhonda. Right, Rhonda?
I'm the only Rhonda here, so easy to find.
Right on. Thank you again, Rhonda Sewell. For everyone out there, you can check out this podcast on the Mahogany Gallery YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/Mahogany Gallery 6771. And you can also view it on the website too. That is mahoganygallery.com. Ms. Rhonda Sewell, thank you again. And we will definitely be talking soon.
The Black Art and Culture Podcast, the home of bold dialogue, cultural brilliance, and perspectives that move the needle forward.